The day I realized my well access was completely blocked by a massive metal storage shed was the same day I knew war had been declared on me by the Copper Ridge Homeowners Association in Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Ian Ashford, and I had owned my property at the edge of the development for 8 years. The land was mine before Copper Ridge even existed as a concept in some developer's fever dream. I had purchased 5 acres of desert property back in 2017, complete with water rights and a deep well that had been drilled in the 1980s by the previous owner. That well was my lifeline, providing crystal-clear water from an aquifer 200 feet below the surface. When the development started creeping toward my property line in 2019, I made sure every document, every deed, every survey was filed properly with Maricopa County. My property was grandfathered in, and I had negotiated that my land would remain independent of the HOA. The developers had agreed in writing that I would never be subject to HOA rules, dues, or oversight. I should have known that would never be enough. The trouble started about 6 months ago when Margaret Hendricks became the new HOA president. Margaret was exactly what you would picture when someone says, HOA Karen, with her razor-sharp blonde bob, designer athleisure where that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, and an expression that looked like she was perpetually smelling something foul. She was 52 years old and had apparently decided that her purpose in life was to enforce conformity on every square inch of Copper Ridge. I first met her when she showed up at my gate on a blistering Tuesday morning in March. I was working on my truck in the driveway when I heard the intercom buzzer. "Hello," I said, wiping grease from my hands. "This is Margaret Hendricks, president of the Copper Ridge HOA. I need to speak with you immediately about several violations on your property." I walked to the gate and looked at her through the wrought iron. She stood there with a clipboard, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not part of the HOA," I said calmly. "My property predates the development, and I have written agreements that I'm independent." "That's simply not acceptable," she said, as if my legal documents were a minor inconvenience. "Your property is surrounded by our community, which means you benefit from our amenities and property values. You need to pay your fair share and comply with community standards." "No, I really don't." "Have a nice day, Margaret." I walked away as she shouted something about legal action. I figured she would calm down once she talked to a lawyer and realized I had ironclad protection. I was wrong. Over the next 2 months, I received constant harassment. Letters threatening legal action arrived weekly. Margaret would drive slowly past my gate, taking photos. Other HOA board members started parking near my property line, watching me like I was some kind of criminal. Then things escalated. In early May, I noticed surveying equipment set up along the eastern edge of my property. A crew of workers was measuring and marking stakes in the ground. I walked over to investigate. "What's going on here?" I asked the crew chief, a weathered man in his 50s named Tom. "HOA is putting in a community storage facility," he said, checking his tablet. "Should be about 40 by 60 feet metal construction." "Where exactly?" He showed me the plans. My blood ran cold. The storage facility would be built right up against my property line, directly in front of the access road I used to service my well. The well itself sat about 15 feet inside my property line, but the only way to reach it with equipment was via a dirt road that ran parallel to the boundary. If they built that storage shed where they planned, I would be completely unable to get any maintenance vehicles to my well. "This can't be right," I said. "This blocks my well access." Tom shrugged. "I just build what they tell me to build, take it up with the HOA." I immediately called Margaret. She answered on the 4th ring. "Margaret, this is Ian Ashford. Your storage facility is going to block access to my well. I'm sure you'll figure something out, she said sweetly. The facility is being built entirely on HOA property. You have no say in what we do with our land. You're deliberately blocking my access. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. We checked with our lawyers. The well is on your property, but access to it is your problem, not ours. Maybe this will encourage you to finally connect to the community water system like everyone else. I have water rights to that well. I'm not giving them up. Then I guess you'll need to find another way to access it. Good day, Mr. Ashford. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, realizing that this was a calculated attack. Margaret had found a way to force me into compliance by making my well useless. I called a property lawyer that afternoon. His name was Robert Chen, and he had handled my original negotiations with the developers. I explained the situation. They're playing a dangerous game, Robert said. But technically, they're right that they can build on their own property. However, if they're deliberately blocking your legal access to a water source that predates their development, we might have grounds for a claim. Let me look into it. How long will that take? Could be months, Ian. Maybe a year if it goes to court. I couldn't wait that long. My well pump was 12 years old and could fail at any time. If it did, I would need to get equipment in there quickly. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched helplessly as the storage facility went up. It was a massive prefabricated metal building, painted in the same boring beige as every other structure in Copper Ridge. The workers completed it with impressive speed. On the day they finished, Margaret herself walked over to my gate. She was holding a bottle of water from the HOA community system. Just wanted to let you know the storage facility is complete, she said, her smile showing too many teeth. I also wanted to inform you that we're prepared to offer you a special rate to connect to our water system. Only $15,000 for the connection, plus a monthly fee of $250. That's 3 times what other residents pay, I said. Well, you're not a resident, are you? This is a special non-member rate. Go to hell, Margaret. Her smile never wavered. Your well will need maintenance eventually. When it does, you'll come crawling back. We both know it. She walked away, and I stood there gripping the gate so hard my knuckles turned white. That night, I sat on my back porch with a beer, staring out at the desert landscape. I had always been a problem solver. My whole career as an engineer had been about finding solutions when everyone else said something was impossible. There had to be a way to fix this. Then, I remembered something interesting. When the development had been built, I had been out here watching the whole process. I remembered seeing the water infrastructure going in, watched as they connected all the houses to the main line that ran from Scottsdale's municipal system. But I also remembered something else, something important. The main water line that fed Copper Ridge ran directly under a corner of my property. I had granted the developers an easement to run the line across my land, back when I thought we were all going to be good neighbors. The easement gave them the right to access the line for maintenance, but the land itself was still mine. The water line sat in a concrete vault about 8 feet below the surface, accessible through a manhole cover that was technically on my property. I pulled out my old files and found the easement agreement. I read it carefully, twice, then a third time to be sure. The easement granted access for maintenance. It said nothing about my right to restrict or control the flow of water through the line. The physical infrastructure was mine to do with as I pleased, as long as I did not damage it or prevent reasonable maintenance access. An idea began forming. It was risky, probably crazy, and would definitely cause a massive fight. But Margaret had fired the first shot by blocking my well. Maybe it was time to return fire. The next morning, I called a plumber I knew named Dave Rodriguez. He had done work for me before and was discreet. Dave, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to install a shut-off valve on a water main, how would they do it? There was a long pause. Ian, what are you planning? Just answer the question. Well, hypothetically, you would need to dig down to the main line, cut into it using proper procedures so you don't cause a pressure surge, and install a gate valve. But that's illegal if you don't own the line. What if the line runs through your property and you own the land? Another pause. That's a gray area, legally murky. You could probably do it, but you'd piss off a lot of people. That's kind of the point. Can you do it? I could, but I won't. Too much liability. However, I know a guy who might help you. His name is Pete Garrison. He is retired now, doesn't care about the politics, and knows water systems inside and out. Want his number? I got Pete's number and called him that afternoon. He was a gruff 68-year-old who had spent 40 years working on municipal water systems. So you want to shut off water to an entire HOA development? Pete said after I explained the situation. Only temporarily. Just enough to make a point. Kid, that's playing with fire. But I respect it. I hate HOAs with a passion. Had one try to find me for painting my mailbox the wrong shade of white. Tell you what, I'll come take a look at your setup. Pete came out the next day. We walked to the corner of my property where the manhole cover sat, hidden under a layer of desert sand and weeds. He pried it open with a crowbar, and we peered down into the concrete vault. The main water line was a thick blue PVC pipe about a foot in diameter, with pressure gauges and connection points already installed. This is a nice setup, Pete said. They did quality work. See that connection point there? That's for future expansion or emergency shutoff. We could install a valve right there without cutting anything. Couple hours of work tops. Is it legal? Well, it's your property. The easement doesn't forbid modifications, just requires that you allow access and don't cause damage. A valve isn't damage, it's infrastructure. Now, if you use that valve to shut off water maliciously, they could sue you. But having the valve, that's your right. Let's do it. We worked through the afternoon. Pete was a professional and he had brought all the necessary equipment. The valve we installed was a large gate valve with a hand wheel. When turned fully open, water flowed normally. When closed, it would stop every drop of water flowing to Copper Ridge. There you go, Pete said as he tightened the last fitting. One shut-off valve properly installed and sealed. I'd recommend you document everything. Take photos, keep records. If this goes to court, you'll want proof that you did quality work and didn't damage anything. I paid Pete in cash, and he left with a warning to be careful. I stood there looking at the valve, knowing that I now held incredible power over Margaret and her HOA. But I didn't use it. Not yet. I wanted to try the legal route first. Robert Chen filed a formal complaint with the county, arguing that the HOA had deliberately blocked my access to a legal water source. We requested an injunction to have the storage facility moved or modified to restore access. The HOA fought back hard. They hired a fancy law firm from Phoenix and flooded the court with motions. Margaret sent me a letter stating that any attempt to interfere with community operations would result in legal action. Weeks passed. June turned into July, and the Arizona heat became oppressive. My well continued to function normally, but I knew it was only a matter of time before something went wrong. Then, on a Saturday morning in mid-July, I heard a grinding noise from the well pump house. I ran over to investigate and found the pump making a horrible squealing sound. I shut it down immediately and called my well service company. Bearing is going out, the technician said after examining the pump. You need a replacement soon, maybe within the week. After that, it could seize up completely. How big is the replacement pump? Same size as this one. About 4 feet long, 300 pounds. You'll need a truck to get it back here, plus a portable crane to lift it into place. I looked at the blocked access road, then at the storage facility sitting like a middle finger pointed directly at me. There was no way to get the equipment in. I would have to hand carry a 300-pound pump and all the tools through the desert, which was functionally impossible. I called Margaret immediately. She answered cheerfully, like she had been expecting my call. "Margaret, my well pump is failing. I need access to replace it." "Oh, that's unfortunate. Have you considered connecting to our water system? You know I can't afford your extortion prices. Move the storage facility or at least open a temporary access gate. The storage facility is on our property, and we have no obligation to modify it for your convenience." "I'm sorry, Ian, but you should have thought about this before refusing to join our community. This is illegal. You're deliberately preventing me from accessing my own water source. Actually, your water source is perfectly accessible. You can walk right to it. We haven't blocked pedestrian access. If you need to bring in heavy equipment, that sounds like a personal problem. I really must go now. Board meeting in an hour." She hung up. I stood there, shaking with rage. That night I made my decision. I had tried the legal route. I had tried reasoning with them. Now it was time for the nuclear option. At midnight, I walked out to the manhole cover. The development was quiet, houses dark, everyone sleeping peacefully with their air conditioning running and their sprinkler systems watering their perfect lawns. I opened the vault and climbed down into it with a flashlight. The valve Pete had installed gleamed in the light, waiting to be used. I grabbed the hand wheel and took a deep breath. Then I turned it clockwise, slowly, listening to the mechanism engage. The valve closed smoothly and I felt the water pressure change. I gave it one final turn until it stopped completely. The water supply to Copper Ridge was now shut off. I climbed out, replaced the manhole cover, and went back to my house. I set my alarm for sunrise, knowing that the real chaos would begin when people woke up and started their morning routines. I was not disappointed. By 7 in the morning, my phone was ringing nonstop. I ignored it. By 8, I could hear shouting from the development. People were going door to door, trying to figure out why no one had water. By 9, I saw Margaret's white Mercedes SUV speeding toward my gate. She laid on the intercom button like she was trying to break it. "Ian, Ian, I know you're in there. What have you done?" I walked to the gate calmly, coffee in hand. "Good morning, Margaret. Something wrong?" "The entire development has no water. What did you do?" "Me? I didn't do anything. Maybe it's a problem with the city system." "This is not funny. People can't shower, can't flush their toilets, can't water their landscaping in this heat. Fix it? Interesting. That sounds like a real emergency, kind of like not being able to access your well pump to prevent it from failing completely." Her face went from red to purple. "You shut off our water. That's illegal." "No, Margaret. I installed a valve on a water line that runs through my property. That's perfectly legal. The easement allows for infrastructure modifications. What I do with that valve is my business. You're going to regret this." "I'm calling the police, the city, the county. You'll be arrested. Feel free. I'll be here." She stormed off, phone already pressed to her ear. I went inside and waited. The police arrived 40 minutes later. 2 officers looking tired and annoyed in the July heat. I met them at the gate. "Sir, I'm Officer Bradley and this is Officer Martinez. We've had a complaint that you've shut off water to the Copper Ridge development. Is that true?" "I've closed a valve on my property, yes." "Can you tell us why?" I explained the entire situation, from my grandfathered property rights to the blocked well access to Margaret's extortion attempt. I showed them my documentation. the easement agreement, and photos of my blocked access road. Officer Bradley read through everything carefully. This is a civil matter, not criminal. You have legal ownership of the property where the valve is located. We can't force you to open it. What? Margaret had appeared behind the officers, her face twisted with rage. He's holding our entire community hostage. Madam, he's exercising his property rights. If you believe he's in violation of the easement agreement, you need to take it to civil court. There's nothing we can do here. This is ridiculous. People have no water, Officer Martinez spoke up. Have you considered negotiating with Mr. Ashford to resolve the underlying dispute? We have nothing to negotiate. He needs to follow community rules like everyone else. Actually, madam, according to these documents, he's legally exempt from HOA jurisdiction. Maybe that's where you should start. The officers left, and Margaret stood at my gate, trembling with fury. You think you've won? This is just beginning. Then I guess Copper Ridge will stay dry, I said. Let me know when you're ready to restore my well access. Over the next 2 days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The temperature hit 112 degrees. People were buying bottled water by the case. Porta potties appeared throughout the development. Residents were checking into hotels just to shower. And Margaret was getting death threats from her own neighbors. I watched it all from my property, well water flowing freely into my house. I felt a little guilty about the innocent residents suffering, but they had elected Margaret. They had stood by while she harassed me. Sometimes you have to endure discomfort to understand what you have allowed to happen. On the 3rd day, I received a visit from someone unexpected. A woman in her 30s, looking exhausted and sunburned, approached my gate. Her name was Linda Vasquez, and she was on the HOA board. Mr. Ashford, can we talk, please? I opened the gate and invited her to my porch. I offered her a cold bottle of water, which she accepted gratefully. I'm not here officially, she said. Margaret doesn't know I'm talking to you, but this has to stop. We have elderly residents who are suffering, kids who can't bathe. This is becoming a health crisis. I agree, it's terrible. All Margaret has to do is restore my well access. She won't. She sees this as a personal war now. Her pride won't allow her to back down. Then I guess we're at an impasse. Linda took a long drink of water. What if we go around her? There are 7 board members. Margaret only has 3 votes that are loyal to her. If I can convince the others, we could hold an emergency vote to override her and agree to your terms. What would you need from me? Time and maybe a gesture of good faith. Give us water for 24 hours while I work on the board. If I can't convince them, you can shut it off again. I thought about it. Linda seemed genuine, and she was right that innocent people were suffering. Okay. I'll open the valve at 6 p.m. tonight. You have until 6 p.m. tomorrow. After that, if nothing changes, the water goes off again. Thank you. I promise I'll do everything I can. She left, and I waited until 6 p.m. Then I walked out to the vault and opened the valve halfway. Enough water to allow basic functions, but not full pressure. A reminder that I was still in control. That night, Linda worked miracles. She called emergency board meetings, lobbied resistant members, and presented them with the legal realities. Margaret's actions had exposed the HOA to massive liability. If my lawsuit succeeded, the HOA would be responsible for damages. If residents started suing because of the water shutoff, it would be even worse. By noon the next day, Linda called me. We have 5 votes, enough to pass a resolution. Can you meet with us at 2 p.m.? Where? The community center. Margaret will be there, and she's going to fight this hard, but we have the numbers. I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp. The community center was packed with angry residents who glared at me as I entered. Margaret sat at the head of the board table, her expression venomous. "This meeting is out of order," she said immediately. "We don't negotiate with extortionists." "Actually, Margaret, I'm calling for a vote," Linda said calmly. "I move that we agree to restore Mr. Ashford's well access by either relocating the storage facility or cutting an access road through it. In exchange, Mr. Ashford will restore full water pressure and drop his lawsuit." "I second that motion," another board member said immediately. His name was James, a retired accountant. "This is insane," Margaret shouted. "We don't give in to threats." "Margaret, you created this situation by deliberately blocking his access," Linda said. "Multiple lawyers have told us he has grounds for a lawsuit he'll probably win." "This is the best way to resolve it. I vote no." "And I vote yes," Linda said. "James?" "Yes." One by one, the board members voted. When it was done, the resolution had passed 5-2. Margaret stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "Fine, do what you want. But I'm resigning as president, effective immediately." "You people deserve whatever happens to you," she stormed out, and the room erupted in conversation. Linda banged a gavel to restore order. "Mr. Ashford, the board has agreed to cut an access road through the storage facility within 1 week. Can you restore full water pressure today?" "Yes, as soon as I get home." "And the lawsuit? I'll have my lawyer draw up a mutual release. As long as my access is restored and stays restored, we're done." I went home and opened the valve completely. Water pressure returned to Copper Ridge within minutes. I could hear cheering from the development. Over the next week, a construction crew cut a 12-foot wide access road through the storage facility, complete with a gate I could open when needed. It was not pretty, but it was functional. My well access was restored. Robert Chen drew up the agreement and both sides signed it. The lawsuit was dropped. I had won, but the story did not end there. 2 weeks after the water was restored, I received a visit from a Maricopa County Sheriff's deputy. He was serving me with a subpoena. "What's this about?" I asked. "There's an investigation into the former HOA president, Margaret Hendricks. They want you to testify about what happened." It turned out that while Linda had been going through HOA records to build her case against Margaret, she had discovered something disturbing. Margaret had been embezzling from the HOA for months, the storage facility that had blocked my well access. It had cost the HOA $45,000, but the actual construction had only cost $20,000. Margaret had pocketed the difference through a shell company. Linda had reported it to the county, and now there was a criminal investigation. I testified at the grand jury hearing in August. I explained everything that had happened, provided my documentation, and described Margaret's behavior throughout the dispute. The grand jury indicted her on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The trial happened in November. I attended when I could, watching as prosecutors laid out a pattern of corruption. Margaret had stolen over $200,000 from the HOA over 18 months. She had created fake invoices, paid herself through dummy companies, and used HOA funds for personal expenses. The jury convicted her on all counts. In January, the judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution. I watched from the gallery as they led her away in handcuffs. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the confident tyrant who had shown up at my gate 10 months earlier. After the sentencing, Linda approached me in the courthouse hallway. She had been elected as the new HOA president after Margaret's resignation. "Thank you for testifying," she said. "We never would have caught her if you hadn't fought back." "I just wanted access to my well," I said. "It was more than that. You exposed what she really was." The whole board was enabling her, too afraid to stand up. "You showed us what happens when you let bullies win." "What happens to the HOA now? We're rebuilding. being more transparent, more accountable, and we've made it a policy to work with neighbors, not against them. I'm sorry for what Margaret put you through. I appreciate that. She hesitated. I know you wanted to stay independent, but if you ever change your mind about joining the HOA, we'd be happy to have you. No pressure, no tricks, just an open invitation. I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew I would not. I went home to my property, my well, and my independence. The access road remained open. The valve remained installed in the vault, though I never had to use it again. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on my porch and look at the lights of Copper Ridge. The development had learned an expensive lesson about the cost of overreach. I had learned that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. My well pump continued to function for another 8 months before it finally gave out. When it did, I had no trouble getting a truck and crane back to replace it. The new pump was installed in 4 hours, and I had fresh water flowing again by evening. Life returned to normal. Margaret served her sentence. Linda ran the HOA with competence and fairness. The residents of Copper Ridge learned to appreciate what they had. And I learned that property rights, carefully defended and properly exercised, were the best protection against those who would abuse their small amount of power. The metal storage facility still stood at the edge of my property, but now it had a road cut through it. A permanent reminder that sometimes the little guy wins, and sometimes the HOA does not get its way. I never regretted what I did. When your back is against the wall and someone tries to take away something as fundamental as your access to water, you have to fight back with everything you have. Margaret had tried to force me into compliance through sabotage and extortion. She had assumed I would be helpless without her approval. She had been wrong. The legal bills had been expensive. The stress had aged me. The conflict had consumed months of my life. But in the end, I had protected what was mine. I had stood up to a bully and won. And somewhere in a state prison, Margaret Hendricks had years to think about what happens when you push someone too far. I never did connect to the community water system. My well continued to provide clean, free water from the aquifer deep below the Arizona desert. The water rights remained mine, along with the land, the independence, and the satisfaction of knowing I had fought the fight and come out ahead. The valve stayed installed in the vault, a piece of insurance I hoped I would never need again. But it was there, just in case, a reminder that leverage works both ways. Sometimes people ask me if I would have done anything differently. I tell them no. When someone declares war on you, you don't win by being nice. You win by being smart, being prepared, and being willing to use every tool at your disposal. Margaret had tried to take my water, so I took hers. And in doing so, I exposed her for what she really was, saved the HOA from further corruption, and secured my property rights for the future. Justice is not always swift, but sometimes, when you fight hard enough and refuse to give up, it arrives exactly when you need it. The Arizona sun continued to beat down on my 5 acres. My well continued to pump cool water from deep underground. And life continued, quiet and independent, exactly the way I wanted it.